All right. So, Servitude by the Black Dahlia Murder releases tomorrow, September 27th. But it just so happens I got my copy from Night Shift merch early and I gave it a listen. So, was it worth the wait? Let's find out. Hey guys, welcome back to Surgical Record Reviews. This is going to be episode 3, I believe, and hopefully one of the last episodes in this rather unprofessional format here. I've been using Zoom for all my videos so far, for those who couldn't tell. Um, I'm going to upgrade as soon as I can. I got a green screen going. I got um, I got a lot of stuff cooking behind the scenes, so trust me when I say this will definitely look more professional going forward, but we're working with what we have because I wanted to get this review in as soon as I can. So, yep, of course, as the intro and the title would suggest, today we're going to be talking about the Black Dahlia Murder's new album, Servitude. Like I showed you right here, I have it on CD. I bought this from Night Shift merch. It was a pre-order, and I got it a few days early. And I've had enough time, I think, to listen to it and just gather my thoughts. I've written a whole note document here just to kind of categorize everything that I discovered about the album in my time listening to it. Um, but before we actually dive into the album itself, I think there's just a few things this album warrants me breaking down first, right? So first of all, this is obviously one of the most anticipated albums of the year as far as death metal goes. The Black Dahlia Murder lost their vocalist Trevor Sternad in 2022, tragically, and everyone was kind of wondering since that happened what direction they would take, whether they would just become a touring band and whatnot. But as we can see now, they have officially returned with their 10th studio album. And with Trevor Sternad's passing, that necessitated a lot of lineup changes in the band. Not necessarily a lot, I would say a significant lineup change, though. So prior to Trevor passing, we had Brendan Ellis on guitar, um, lead guitar rather, and Brian Eschbach, rhythm guitar, Trevor Sternad on vocals. So now we have Brian Eschbach moving to the vocal slot. We have Brendan Ellis staying in lead guitar, and now a former collaborator with the band, Ryan Knight, is now the rhythm guitarist with them. So something interesting to note is that both Ryan Knight and Brendan Ellis had tenures in the melodic death metal band Arsis. For anyone who's not aware, I highly recommend you check Arsis out because if you like this kind of technical melodic death metal stuff, you'll definitely love what they've put out over the years. So Ryan Knight was on 2008's We Are the Nightmare by them, and Brandon Ellis was on both Unwelcome and Visitant. That was the name. I was drawing a blank there for a second. He was also on the EP that came out before Unwelcome called Leper's Caress, but for all intents and purposes, he was on 2 studio albums. So what I was expecting going into this was less of the Black Dahlia Murder that we know and love today, and rather a more Arsis influenced sort of technical melodic death metal sound. That's not to say there's a whole lot separating the two, but I was really just expecting sort of more Arsis with Brian on vocals. Now, when the single Aftermath dropped, my suspicions were denied, essentially, because even though it turned out that Brian Eschbach was no longer playing guitar, he was still a big collaborator when it came to writing. He wrote, I believe, half of the songs on here, or something to that extent. He was just a big writing contributor to the album as a whole. And it shows, because at the end of the day, this is still very much a classic Black Dahlia Murder album. Now, before we get into the music itself, I wanted to show you real quick. I have the vinyl here as well. I haven't opened it. I'm hoping that when I get to see them again live, that I'll be able to get the guys to sign it. In that case, I'll take it out of the packaging. But as you can see here, they are side by side, the CD and the vinyl. And something I noticed right away that was interesting is that the album art was kind of squashed for the CD, and the logo doesn't have quite the same black outline that it does on here. Just an interesting formatting difference. I'm not sure why they decided to go with that. Um, I think the album art itself has some interesting qualities. We've we've been accustomed to the Black Dahlia Murder releasing albums with a single color theme, and this is no exception. So this is obviously gray, pretty monotone, whereas the previous one was green and the one before that was red, the one before that was brown. So it's keeping with the theme of one color. Um, but the album art itself is quite different from what we'd expect from the band. Um, it's not this like sprawling landscape or any, like structure, I don't know. I'm thinking along the lines of Nightbringers for the sprawling landscape, and then for structure, I'm thinking like Everblack, Nocturnal, that sort of thing. Definitely different from what we've seen from them, but certainly not bad. We'll take a look on the inside here as well. We got some demonic stuff going on there, and then the back is much the same as it was on the LP. So, with all the rather unnecessary stuff out of the way, I think it's time we get into the actual meat of the review, what we all probably came here for, the music. So, how does this compare to the past releases? I want to say, first of all, this is definitely a more classic Black Dahlia Murder sound. I think what we got on Verminous and Nightbringers was definitely amazing. I love the direction they were going on those albums, especially Nightbringers. I think Verminous was a slight step back, but not by much. I think stylistically it was fairly congruent, and it took them in a pretty cool new direction. But this is without a doubt a more classic album. I'm thinking when I listened to this album all the way through, it was giving me a sort of mix between Defloret and Miasma. Um, don't quote me on that because obviously the more I listen to it, the more my opinions change on how the sound compares to the other albums. But I think that's fairly a good comparison there. Vocally, I think certainly more of a Miasma vibe because the way Brian Eschbach taking over the vocal slot from Trev, he sort of does a lot of the high to low things during verses that we heard more from Trevor in that era. Um, and that's definitely not a bad thing. I think a lot of people going into this album were expecting this to just be like Brian doing his best Trevor impersonation or whatever. And I could see why that would still come off as that to most people, but he's definitely doing something that's unique. It's not exactly like Trevor. He's not just trying to sound like a copy of Trevor. And I think that's evident because we've heard Brian sing songs for the band before on like some bonus tracks on like Abysmal, and I believe even Verminous. There was a track where he did the vocals, or maybe it was Nightbringers. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he really hasn't changed much from then, and it shows that he is still a pretty phenomenal vocalist, even though he's only really mostly done backing vocals up to this point. He fills in that role nicely, and you're never once taken out of the experience because of the fact that the vocals aren't quite, what Trevor would have done, at least modern Trevor, right? Um, Lyrically, and I think vocally, he does some things that aren't quite Trevor. I think first of all. And not that I think he should be compared to Trevor because obviously he's his own vocalist, he's his own lyricist. But he's taken a page out of Trevor's book in some respects. If you look at a song like Cursed Creator, I think there's a lot of Trevor influences from the lyrical perspective. The way he kind of crafts the story about Frankenstein's monster, definitely has some like sort of narrative similarities to something like what Trevor may have done. Um, but the flow of the lyrics is definitely a little bit different. I don't want to call it clunky, but I will say it's not quite as refined as what Trevor was doing with the band. Some of the placements of the words and some of the placements of the syllables were kind of all over the place at times. Um, and everything just feels slightly more haphazard. But I think it also, even though it doesn't sound as refined, it brings in sort of chaos to it, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. Again, this is not the same Black Dahlia Murder that we've heard before. This is obviously a new lineup here, and you should expect these changes going into it. None of these are negatives whatsoever. This is still an absolutely ripping album. If you love the Black Dahlia Murder, you will absolutely love this album. All the solos are killer. Ryan Knight and Brandon Ellis are both phenomenal. Two of the standouts for me would probably be the two singles, Aftermath and Mammoth's Hand. I love the solos on those tracks. On top of that, what are some other standouts? Not even just from a guitar solo perspective, but I'm just looking at the track list again. I think Panic Hysteric was super, super cool. There's this melodic line that shows up, I think, twice during the song. that was um, a surprise, but it was super rewarding in your ears, so to speak. Um, I should have probably written down the actual timestamp for it, but I'm sure if you listen to the song tomorrow when it drops, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. That one also has some more typical sort of Trevor style vocals on there. Aftermath, of course, ripping. Cursed Creator, like I said, I love that song lyrically. And I think musically it's also very impressive. I wasn't huge on the song Servitude or Evening Ephemeral. I think they're both great songs, don't get me wrong. But as with an album like this where every track is phenomenal, it's kind of those two felt like the least exceptional of the bunch. Um, of course, you can include an intermission on that because it is like a 20 or 30-second long just acoustic interlude. Um, but I think that also serves the album very well. Utopia Black, I think, was a great way to end the album. And reading the lyrics of Transcosmic Blueprint, I was very, very impressed and shocked to find that it was actually a concept built around 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was super, super cool. And it wasn't a direction I would have expected Brian to go lyrically on this, but I think it worked really well. And I think the music suits the concept great. Utopia Black, pretty cool way to end the album. The ending you know, kind of ties off the album very nice. And I think this had to be a satisfying package in order to appease the fans. And it really, I think, did that. Now, on the other hand, I will say I did do a little bit of research before this. This is their shortest studio album to date of original material. I think it's just shy of 33 minutes, and I think their shortest album was slightly above 33. Now, again, that difference is minute at best, but considering they've released albums of over 45 minutes, that can definitely make this album seem a little underwhelming if you're used to something like Ritual. I believe Ritual was the one that came to mind that was above 45. But this really does fly by. It's a great short listen, but if you're expecting a ton of new material from the band with this release, you're not really going to get that. You're going to get 30 minutes of really, really solid melodic death metal. You're just not going to get much more than that. It's not long enough to really f feel like it's fleshed out into something bigger than it is. And I think that's fine. I really do. Again, when you get into this album, just don't expect to really go on an adventure. Like say you might feel when you're going to like an album like I think Everblack sort of gives me that vibe. Like when I dive into that album, I feel like I'm going on a journey. This one is just like, okay, you're gonna get pummeled and it's gonna be done, you know? And it's absolutely wonderful for that. Now, I did also want to talk about the production on this. That is the one thing that will definitely make or break this album for a lot of people. The production is very, very modern, but it's not exactly what we've heard from the band before. So we're used to the Black Dahlia Murder with all the melodic lines very forward and the vocals complementing them. Now what we have here is instead of the vocals complementing melodic lines, you have melodic lines seemingly complementing the vocals. The guitars are really kind of buried in the mix a lot of the time. This is a very rhythmic album, at least from a mix perspective. The album wants to be brutal, and in doing so, they raise the drums really high in the mix. The vocals are very crisp and very forward. Um, and the bass is actually quite heavy as well, but the guitars, relative to everything else, are a lot lower than what we've grown to expect from the band, especially on an album, again, like say Nightbringers or Verminous, the two other most recent albums. I will say, even though the guitars are lower and you do miss some of the detail and the tone itself is a little tinny, I think the overall mix is better than what we got on something like Nightbringers because that album for me, and I'll probably do an album ranking actually with my brother who happens to be another big Black Dahlia Murder fan in the future. But Nightbringers specifically for me was just like it almost hurts your ears. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying that, but I think the mix is just like so like loud and pummeling that it's almost exhausting to listen to. This, even though it's a brutal album, super fast, super technical, super in your face, it's not to the point where it's annoying. And again, here a lot of people are going to hear me call the Nightbringers mix annoying, but don't take that the wrong way. Again, that's still a phenomenal album, but I think this is just a lot more pleasing to the ears while still maintaining a lot of the technical brutality you'd expect from the band. So I would say that about sums up my thoughts here. This isn't a super in-depth review. In fact, my notes were very sparse when I came into this, and in the essence of getting this review out as fast as possible, I didn't prepare as much as maybe I should have. So this is probably the least surgical of these surgical record reviews that'll be released on this channel, hopefully. So with all that in mind, I would give the Servitude by the Black Dahlia Murder a very solid 7 out of 10 surgical knives. But this is still a great album. If you're a fan of the Black Dahlia Murder or melodic death metal at all, or even technical death metal, I think you're going to find something to love here. There really is something for everyone who enjoys death metal, right? You have these very melancholic acoustic passages scattered across the album. You have absolutely pummeling songs like like Aftermath. You have these kind of more slow burn songs like something like Curse Creator or even Mammoth's Hand, of course. And overall, you just have a really concise package. So if you listen to the album and you don't love it, it's not like you wasted your time. I'm extremely excited to see where the band goes here on out. And I think they show a lot of potential as a group, bringing Ryan Knight back into the fold and having both Brandon and Ryan write some riffs as well. That's about it for today. So I hope you all enjoyed. Please, please, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the album. If you thought my analysis of this sucked, please let me know. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you've seen so far. And like I said, I promise this whole video format will become much more professional going forward. So I think that's about all for today. Your stay in the operating room has finished. I'll see y'all next time.